General Pam Bondi clashing with lawmakers yesterday during a lengthy House Judiciary Committee hearing and offering little new information on the Epstein files, but repeatedly shouting, throwing insults, and deflecting questions.
How many of Epstein's co-conspirators have you indicted? How many perpetrators are you even investigating?
First, you showed it. I find it.
How many have you indicted?
Excuse me. I'm going to answer the question.
Answer my question.
No, I'm going to answer the question the way I want to answer the question.
No, you're going to answer the question the way I asked it.
You can let her filibuster all day long, but not on our watch.
Reclaim
not
it?
on our time. No way.
Reclaim
and I
it?
told you about that, Attorney General, before you started.
You don't tell me.
Yeah, I
anything,
did tell you because we saw what you did in the Senate.
You're a lawyer, not even a lawyer.
I'm going to teach you the rules again. You're the Attorney General of the United States. We have rules here.
You're obsessed with him.
You're the Attorney General of the United States.
You're
the rules.
obsessed with Donald Trump. You have Trump derangement syndrome.
Joining us now, someone you just heard in that exchange, ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland. Congressman, thank you for joining us. We'll get to the substance of the hearing in just a second, but first a quick note on just how this went down, the demeanor, the combativeness of the Attorney General. You know, we were talking earlier this show from people who have been in these hearings time and time again. It just felt like a sort of a sad farce.
Well, it was surreal. I mean, I've been in Congress nearly a decade now, and I have never seen a witness act with such contempt and spectacular disrespect for the rules of a committee, members of Congress, or Congress itself. And it was surreal. I kept thinking about a scene in Carrie from when I was in high school where like forks and spoons and knives start sailing around the room. And it was like that. It was like the Twilight Zone in there.
Yeah, certainly. She came ready to attack and less so to answer questions. So let's turn now to the substance. What were some things in particular that left you perhaps dismayed or disappointed? What are some of the questions you still really want to get answered?
Well, the central problem is whether we were talking about the Epstein file, which was the source of a lot of questions, or the massive violation of civil rights and civil liberties taking place in Minneapolis and across the country, or a number of other areas. She constantly sided with the perpetrators against the victims. And so there were survivors of Epstein's the international child sex trafficking ring in the room yesterday, and a number of my colleagues challenged Bondi to apologize to them for failing to redact their names and releasing and publishing to the world their names, their phone numbers, their addresses, in some cases nude images from them when they were younger. She refused to apologize. She began to attack Ms. Jayapal. She attacked Mr. Nadler. She attacked most of the members of the committee. She arrived with a burn book of insults about members and about their districts that she wanted to lob at everyone. And we were ready for that because we had played the game tapes from her over in the Senate, and we were astonished that she was, rather than answering questions, completely dodging the substance and attacking the members. And so we just said simply to Chairman Jordan, she can do it, but not on our time. We're not going to accept that. Stop the clock, and you can let her filibuster in her way. But I think the whole country got to see what extraordinary disrespect the Attorney General of the United States of America has for the rule of law. We basically have one rule in that committee, and she violated it for the entire day.
I mean, for some reason, this woman let these victims, she turned her nose up to them, victims of repeated sexual abuse, even at times when they were children. She refused to even recognize these victims when they stood up and raised their hands. It is truly, for me,
with direct.
Yeah.
Yeah. She was confronted with direct evidence of crimes that we showed her. For example, with Prince Andrew, there was photographic evidence of him perched over a young girl, and she just repeatedly refused to accept the reality of any of the evidence of crimes. There are hundreds or thousands of crimes that are perfectly readily identifiable in all of the information they've put out, and even more in the information, the 3 million documents they're withholding. But she refuses to acknowledge that or recognize it, and that's why I started off by saying she is perpetrating from the Department of Justice a massive cover-up of the Epstein conspiracy and all of these other co-conspirators who are out there. And she was repeatedly asked, are you investigating the other co-conspirators? Have you indicted any of them? And the answer was no. She essentially killed the investigation when they took office in January of 2025. She got the file from the Southern District of New York prosecutors and said, this is over.
Wow. You know, it's just so interesting watching her just repeatedly refuse to recognize them, not even saying that she would want to hear from them. They even made it clear they would go back, even given how they've been treated in the past. And again, just nothing, stone-faced from her. She would turn her nose up and look at her notes and look for a new insult to send the next lawmaker. Yeah. But there is a different Pam Bondi I would like to remind our viewers, and maybe Pam, about. In 2014, while running for re-election as Florida Attorney General, Pam Bondi released this TV ad entitled Human Trafficking. Take a look.
Florida ranks 3rd nationally in calls for help for human trafficking, where young women and children are enslaved and abused. I knew we needed all hands on deck. Businesses and hospitals to spot it, our great law enforcement to stop it, and tougher penalties to punish it. We're taking on Medicaid fraud, pill mills, gangs, and more. And I'll fight to put human trafficking monsters where they belong, behind bars.
I don't know where that Pam went, because she's great. I mean, she sounds like she's serious about these perpetrators, these human traffickers. What the heck happened yesterday? Where is she? And what was she doing there, do you think?
I think she was playing to an audience of one. And she was oblivious to or completely indifferent to how the country was experiencing her utterly rude and obnoxious behavior towards Congress and her contemptuous attitude towards the victims, and not just victims of human trafficking who were seated behind her, but also the families of Renee Good, of Alex Preddy, and all the other victims of the federal government violence that have been taking place. I mean, she had not a word of sympathy or interest in any of their cases, and she refused to even defend the fact that, for example, they unleashed an investigation against Renee Good's grieving widow, and she, didn't even bother to defend that. So we're talking about a Department of Justice that is essentially operating like an instrument of revenge for Donald Trump against his enemies, whether it's members of Congress, like a bunch of our colleagues. A grand jury just refused to indict them, but we know that he's gone after James Comey, after Letitia James, after the head of the Federal Reserve Board, after Lisa Cook. And I said yesterday that he orders prosecutions and indictments like pizzas, and Pam Bondi delivers. She just is playing to that audience of one person. She's not interested in listening to the victims of real crimes out in the country. And then what was very galling to people was how she kept trying to take credit for dramatic drops in crime we've seen around the country going back into the Biden administration, and because of state and local governments and law enforcement that she's basically been at war with, as in Minneapolis. But she wanted to take credit for all of the progress the country's been making over the last several years.
Congressman, to follow up on, as you say, the retribution campaign being carried out by this Department of Justice on behest of President Trump, in particular zeroing in on those 6 lawmakers who simply recorded a video urging military members to follow only lawful orders, reminding them that's their duty. As you say, a grand jury declined to indict them. But talk to us about where this could go next. I mean, we had reporting earlier today that they're still looking at other means to perhaps try to charge those 6 members. And what about other members of Congress? You yourself, obviously the president's not a fan of yours. Is this a fear that you have, that you could be next?
So we're talking about the Attorney General of the United States of America participating in a plan to target 6 members of Congress, the Article 1 branch of government, who are military veterans who served our country in uniform as well as in Congress, because they used their First Amendment rights to tell people what the law is, which is that members of the military have not just a right but a duty to disobey a criminal order, an unlawful order. And that's something, by the way, that Pam Bondi herself has stated in the past. Well, we have reached a point of Orwellianism and authoritarianism if people have to be afraid for speaking the truth and exercising their First Amendment rights. And so I think that the country is in an uproar about what's taking place. And we saw yesterday how the Department of Justice is not doing anything to defend anybody's rights or liberties, not doing anything to defend the Bill of Rights, but they basically view themselves as a law firm for one guy and to go after his enemies. Now, the amazing thing is how many grand juries across America are vindicating the vision that the framers of the Constitution had, that the grand jury would be a place where people would get together and use their common sense and stop a tyrannical executive from abusing the rights and liberties of the people. So there were 2 grand juries that rejected the attempt to indict Letitia James, and there was a jury, and that was in Virginia, and in the District of Columbia, there was a jury just a couple days ago which rejected their attempt to indict Maggie Goodlander and Mark Kelly and a bunch of our other colleagues. And so I think people are exercising every right and every duty we have as citizens to stand up against tyranny.
Ranking member of the House Judiciary Committee, Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin of Maryland, thank you very much for coming on the show this morning.